Good morning, good afternoon, and evening to you all. Welcome and Akwaba, as we say it in Ghana, to everyone joining us today. My name is Ruby Golo, the Executive Director for Global Chamber. Oh, I think I'm muted. Am I? Okay, I'll take it again.
We heard you, Ruby.
Right, okay. So welcome in Akwaba, as we say it in Ghana, to everyone joining us today. My name is Ruby Golo, the Executive Director for Global Chamber in Ghana. A few housekeeping rules. We will appreciate it if you could keep your microphones on mute unless you are called to speak. But do feel free to use the chat box to share your full contact detail and take the advantage of networking with other participants privately. For those of you joining us for the first time, Global Chamber is the only chamber of commerce dotted in different locations across the globe, delivering most of our services virtually. Membership is open to all, and so if you like what we do here today and would like to know more, then please feel free to get in touch with me after the event. Now, when expanding your business internationally, you need to communicate well and build great connections with people across borders, plus make the most of your virtual meetings. It is for this reason that we are excited to have Victoria Reynoldson, who is also a member of the Global Chamber London chapter, as our guest speaker to share her knowledge and thoughts on today's topic, communicating effectively with your global customers. Victoria coaches international professionals to be communication and culturally confident, to build connections and relationships which improve their performance, results, and career growth. She is the founder and director of Perfect Cooper English and an expert speaker and writer on communication and culture. You can find out about her coaching and connect with her on LinkedIn. We therefore could not have chosen any other person to present on this topic. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you can today and help make this section interactive. On this note, I will hand over to Victoria to take it away. Victoria, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ruby, for the very warm welcome to your lovely global Global Chamber meeting. And thank you and welcome everybody to today's session. This is meant to be an interactive session. So although I'll be sharing my screen, and unfortunately today I won't be able to see you so well, please feel free to unmute yourself, to put your questions in the chat. Ruby, could you perhaps let me know if I'm missing questions in the chat because I'm so busy speaking, just let me know. I'm happy to pause and answer questions as we go. And I really wanted to share this session today because I feel quite passionately that the way we communicate and connect definitely has an international element to it, but also has some cultural influences. And one of the sort of hot topics, which continues to be a hot topic, is, how do I connect and communicate, particularly with customers in the virtual space, when all I have is this rectangle that I'm meeting them through. I don't really get to meet them face to face. So even if you've been able to travel a little bit more now, I'm sure, like me, a lot of your meetings are still virtual. So without any further delay, let's get into the presentation. I'm just going to share my screen, and perhaps people at Ruby can give me a bit of shout out to let me know that it's being seen once it goes live. And I'm just going to make sure you can see my video at the same time. Okay, great. So Ruby, is that all? Let me just check it's coming through. Is it all visible then?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect, that's great. So a little bit about me. Thank you. Ruby's already very, very kindly introduced me. Just to tell you that I've been in this space, I've been running this business for 7 years now, but this is actually my second career. And I started life in working in some very large British and American companies in international teams, which is where I noticed this particular challenge around what I call the communication gap, where we all seem to be speaking the same language, but actually there is a lot going on that is not being seen or understood between the lines. And that's where I felt that there was an opportunity to help individuals and teams to understand where these communication gaps were coming up, where they were being driven by language, communication, or culture, and help people to communicate better so they could work better together globally. And I'm based in the UK and based in London and part of the London Metro for Global Chamber. So in terms of today's session, our objectives for today, we're going to be talking about key cultural factors which influence great conversations. I'll also talk today about best practice in approach for successful virtual meetings, and then the top ways to communicate in those virtual meetings. So primarily thinking about the virtual space in international business. So why does culture matter? Well, I suspect that most of you here today know this. If you're part of Global Chamber, I'm sure you understand that culture matters, and it's important not to assume that we all operate in the same way. But this is quite an important reminder, because sometimes we kind of forget this, that actually we think we're in this globalized, connected world, that we can just hop on calls to wherever we want to in a different country. But culture does have an impact and an influence. So a couple of quotes here, which I think really bring this to life. The first one is from Audre Lorde, I think you pronounce it. It is not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And applying that idea to the space of thinking about cultural intelligence in business, I think that's really important, that we don't just ignore our differences, that we understand that we have different approaches to how we communicate and how we interact. And we need to recognize these if we want to be successful in global business. And the other quote, which I found, which I thought was really fascinating, was once you understand and appreciate other people's cultures, then you can also connect with them more. And that was really critical for me, because for me, this is the ultimate goal for all of us, right? We want to connect, we want to build those relationships. So what are the values, attitudes, and behaviors that vary across cultures? Well, if I give you a metaphor for it, I think this is quite a useful way to think about how culture impacts how we're communicating. If you think about culture as an iceberg, then you imagine the large iceberg where you see this part at the top here, the 20% is visible, and this huge amount underneath, the 80% is invisible. It's just not seen. And if I kind of explain that in terms of the context of culture, you know, what is visible or perhaps audible or experienced is the language people use, their non-verbal behavior, so their body language, their hand gestures, even things like tone of voice are what we experience. And we take all that information and we try and interpret what's going on. But the thing is, we tend to interpret it through our own glasses. So we may not realize it, but we all have our own pair of cultural glasses, which are really about, you know, how we see the world and how we perceive and observe what's going on. But there is a whole lot that sits underneath the surface. So values, attitudes, beliefs, which are driving the external behaviors and the external language we hear and the communication style. So as an example, one thing might be about how we approach small talk. It sounds like a small thing, but actually the way we approach small talk is different depending on where we are based around the world. Some cultures have no value for it whatsoever and see it as a waste of time. I would much rather get down straight to business. For example, in somewhere like Finland, or even countries like Russia or Germany. But in other cultures, it's incredibly important. You need to spend the time getting to know somebody and building the relationship. You couldn't possibly talk about business until you've built up the small talk. So I'm now going to open up, and just please feel free to unmute. It's probably the easiest way to do this, and ask, what other factors do you think might vary across cultures? I'd like to invite you to sort of contribute and see if there are any other thoughts that you have.
The floor is open. Who will take it first?
Are people feeling a bit quiet and shy today? That's okay. That's okay. Well, let me give you a few more examples. I'll give you one or two more. Maybe this will help getting the juices flowing in terms of your thoughts. So perhaps another one might be listening style. So the way that we show that we're listening to somebody, again, really varies culturally. For some cultures, it's polite to stay absolutely still and listen very carefully, but without any kind of real movement in the face, in the body, and probably not with direct eye contact either. For other cultures, particularly in the UK, the US, listening, you would indicate you're listening by perhaps nodding your head, with making eye contact, with showing with your body that you're listening very, very carefully. For example, in the virtual space, you can show you're listening by leaning in slightly and showing that you're listening to somebody. Another one might be decision making. How so important for global business. How are decisions made? If you are working with a culture which is very hierarchical, then it might be that you need to influence several layers before you get to the final point, the most senior person who needs to make the decision. For other cultures, some examples might be Sweden or Israel, that the structures are much more less hierarchical and much more flat. And in fact, you may only need one or two people on board for a decision to be made. So there's a few more examples. Does anybody would like to have a go now and perhaps suggest any other factors that might vary across cultures?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Well, I come from Spain, and I would say that the content is quite different from one culture to another one. For example, I would not understand a meeting without a coffee, or like going for lunch or going for dinner with my business people. That's something I would not understand how to deal with that.
Amazing example. Thank you so much for sharing that. So absolutely, having some sort of context and other parts of this, you need to, from a Spanish point of view, it's about the food, the drink. That is so important to be able to do business. And without that, that would be hard to kind of get the business conversation going. Amazing example. Thank you. Has anybody got anything else they'd like to share?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I am from Angola. Sorry, I'm actually in my car driving, and
no problem.
This is the advantage of this online environment. Now, one of the key points I would also like to add to this is in African culture. Usually, I'm talking about Angola. It's like when you shake hands, like if the person you are meeting looks like older than you, like then in our culture it's not. As a young person, being younger, you are not allowed like to stretch your hands. You see, you have to just wait until the older person gives you the hand. That has a very, very relevant impact when you, for example, are going to meet somebody who is higher than you in terms of hierarchy. For example, if you have an appointment with a minister or a president, then you do very well to wait for him to stretch his hands to you than you going first. So this has a very, very powerful impact on how the meeting will actually proceed. Thank you.
That's an amazing example. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, that is something, and clearly that's so important to culture in Angola and not obvious maybe to other cultures. And we could potentially make a very serious mistake that really risks the whole business opportunity. Thank you for sharing that. Did I hear somebody else unmuting there?
Yeah, my name is Doug. Doug Hartley. I'm in Calgary in Canada.
Oh, welcome. Hello.
Howdy. I'm thinking how you introduce yourself and how you introduce yourself to others and vice versa. Whether do you have the title correctly and be able to pronounce the person's name well.
Yeah,
I think is important.
yes, you're absolutely right. So that is so interesting because, you know, we've talked about greetings, the handshake. You know, in some cultures, the handshake is, I think, coming out of fashion. And even, you know, with COVID, perhaps even people maybe for some cultures are not doing handshakes anymore. Being able to pronounce somebody's name correctly, it's so important. We may not get it right. And I think it's always better. It's something, a top tip in terms of global business, to always ask up front, can I check how I would pronounce your name correctly, please? Because that is just, you know, if we do it wrong, that is one way to really potentially frustrate another person. So I think these are all fantastic examples, and I love the way that you're getting to think about this, and you can all come up with some live examples right now. Couple of others for you. Huge topic in itself. How do we give feedback to people? So whether this is about positive or negative feedback, I think actually particularly with negative feedback, we have to be very mindful and know, is the culture we're working with expecting direct feedback or a more indirect communication style? And this is so important if we want to be perceived in the right way. And then finally, perception of time. This is a favorite of mine. I find this fascinating because, yes, of course, surely time is time. We all have the same, you know, maybe view of what time is about, but not at all. In fact, there's a brilliant question that one of the interculturalists once asked, who's an academic in this area. She said, you know, how late is late? Well, for some cultures, you can't be late. You have to be on time, if not, for example, for a meeting, a few minutes early. For other cultures, it would be totally acceptable to be even up to an hour late because something had happened which was very important that you had to prioritize. And clearly, time isn't just about meetings. It's about how do we deliver our projects. It's about when we respond to the emails we receive. So it really does have a big implication. So I hope you're starting to get a feel now that actually there are, and these are just a few, by the way, you know, there are many, many cultural factors that influence how we do business. And it is really important for us to build up our self-awareness before we're operating in a very new market to really understand, you know, what's going on in this market, what's important, what are some of the behavioral norms and some of the sort of business codes that I need to know about to be really successful. And let's think about it in the virtual space. If the iceberg is hard for us to understand in general, in virtual meetings, the iceberg is even less visible because we have this small screen that we're communicating through. So now I want to talk about particularly virtual meetings and how we can set ourselves up for success. And these are general principles which I think are very important to think about and to be mindful of when we're kind of setting up the environment. So let's talk about, first of all, the challenges of virtual meetings. I mean, this is not new, right? We all have perhaps customers who have turned off their screen and we're trying to talk to them and maybe present our ideas, but all we see is the black screen, the dreaded black screen. We know that some of our customers are probably exhausted. They're in meetings a lot of the time, even if some days they're back in the office, they're still spending a lot of time on their screen and in meetings. I'm sure you recognize the bottom left. I'm sure you've all had customer meetings where you know in the background your customer's probably trying to do something else. So they're trying to check their emails at the same time as talk to you or have a meeting and listen to your presentation. So this problem of multitasking is quite challenging because we want their focused attention to build the relationship. And clearly engagement is a really big challenge in the virtual space. This is not new news, by the way, I do understand that, but it's worth remembering this because there are things we can do to be successful if we think about it in the setup of the virtual meeting. So first of all, let's start with our presence, i.e., how do we come across in this rectangle of space that we have? And I'm about to flash up in a minute some pictures of me, and they're pictures of me in different virtual meetings. And some of these I think work well. Some of these work not very well. And I would love to know, again, please feel free just to unmute and let me know which ones kind of work for you and which ones don't work for you so well. So I'm going to bring them up now. And again, I'm not going to be offended by anything you say. I deliberately created these for this training, so for this talk today. So tell me, which ones do you think are working here and which ones are not working?
I particularly like the one bottom left.
Bottom left. Okay, so tell me more about that. Why do you like this one?
I like it because your face is front and center. It's easy to see you. You have a warm smile and your background is not distracting.
Okay, so just to double check, so we were, I don't know if, can you see my arrow on screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, do you mean this one here? I'm looking, or do you mean the bottom of the left?
Below that one, below that.
This one here. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I should have labeled them, I realize now. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts at all?
I love the bottom middle.
Okay, so tell me about that. Why do you like this one?
Because it's like, for me, there's a lot of body language going on and I'm seeing you in a character state where you're interacting.
Excellent. Okay, good. Any other thoughts before I reveal my thoughts on this?
The top middle is a bit blurred.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I like the bottom right.
Bottom right. Okay. And what is it you like about it? I think we might have. Okay, I think I might have lost that person. I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, can I chip in? This is
yes, of course. I think we've lost the other person. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
but
maybe
Doug?
you could mute them.
Should I let them finish speaking?
Maybe Cesar could mute.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm so sorry to do that. Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry. I apologize. We couldn't hear you quite, but feel free to put it in the chat. I'm absolutely love to hear that. And did I hear Doug unmuting there?
It was Derek in Nairobi.
Oh, Dirk, sorry, my apologies. So tell me, what would you like to add?
So Victoria, early on when our world changed and we started doing these Zoom meetings as a matter of life or death, literally.
Yes, yes.
I was told that there is something called the rule of thirds. And if you break the screen into three, imagine breaking the screen into thirds, horizontally and vertically, that you should position yourself ideally in one of those thirds. So for me, the bottom right hand works best for me if I go what I was told.
Okay, fantastic. That's a really, really good contribution. So this is fantastic. I love the fact we're contributing and adding to the conversation. And excuse me. And what I would say is there are a couple of obvious things which don't work. So it's clearly, if you can't see my face because the light is behind me, that isn't going to work. So always make sure you have enough light. when it comes to this one, I know somebody quite liked this one here. The only thing I would say about bottom left is just be really careful, because what I'm doing here is my face is quite close in. Can you see how like close up it is? And I'm also looking down. Now you need to be a bit careful of this. Some people forget this, but when you're looking down, this might create a power dynamic with the other person, that they feel like you're looking down at them. So it's always better to have the camera at eye line. In terms of background, there are lots of different views on this. And what I would say is this is something that might be culturally driven. There are some cultures which are more private and more reserved. So, for example, I was working with a Japanese team last week, and they would always put on, so this style background, so a corporate background or a virtual background, or they would blur their background. They wouldn't want to show anything about their personal situation, space, if they weren't working in the office. For other cultures, they really want to get to know you, and they want to know more about who you are and what you're like. And so it would be important to show the natural background. But clearly, we need to be very careful that we're curating our backgrounds. And I'm sure we've all been there or seen some embarrassing videos in the past about people who haven't thought about this. But just make sure your background is fairly neutral, whatever you choose. So the principles are, I think at the end there, we just heard about the third. I also like to think about the rectangle, that we're filling the rectangle, and that you want to see your head and shoulders. You want your eyes at the camera level, so people feel like you're making eye contact with them. And whatever you choose in terms of your background, be mindful of it. And maybe just think about the culture you'll be meeting with. Do you think they are perhaps more private or reserved, and perhaps it's better to have a neutral background? Or maybe they're a culture where they'd want to know you as a person. And then finally, this is a very simple point, but we're all working in different time zones, and sometimes we might have to hop on a call when it's early in our morning or late at night. Make your lighting work for you. So, you know, simple thing, just grab yourself like, this is a ring light, but you can buy very simple lights that you can use it on your desk just to add lighting. Make sure your face is visible, because that is so important. Again, we want to be feeling like we're connecting with other humans, that we're not just being lost and can't be seen in terms of what's going on with our face and our body. So that's about presence. Connected to this is energy, the importance of energy. I'm a great believer in this, and if you're interested in this topic, I highly recommend you watch a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, which is all about this, about how our energy and our confidence even can be built up through our body language and what we're doing with our body. But just a couple of points on this today. The first thing is, others do pick up on your energy, even if it's through the tiny screen that we have. And it's so important. If you want to be building relationship with customers on the other side of the world, you want them to feel your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion for your product or service. So make sure it comes across. This is me. This is literally what I'm sort of standing at the moment. I don't have anything fancy, but I do believe in standing for important meetings and for talks like this and events that I do. It gives a totally different energy. You can probably see that my body is more mobile, that I'm a bit more energetic because I'm standing up. And I do recommend it if you have the chance. You don't need any fancy, electronic desk or anything. This is just a very simple wooden stand that I use. And I can literally dismantle it in 3 seconds and sit back at my desk if I need a break. But I do think for certain types of meetings, for connecting with other people, particularly when you never meet them, this is a great way to just bring your energy in. If you need to sit down because of your health or other reasons why you need to sit down, maybe in an office environment, then I want you to think 90, 90, 90. What do I mean by this? Right angles. So make sure, just like your grandmother said, that you're sitting up nice and tall, and that you're basically using the 90 degrees with your back to the seat, with your knees and your legs, and then with your feet flat on the floor. And this will give you energy as well if you prefer to sit down. So that's a little bit about the energy. Now let's talk about body language, because this is so important. And again, something that people forget. Now, I'm sure that you know how to use body language in, say, a presentation or meetings that you normally have. But there are a few points which are really particular to virtual space that we need to bear in mind that will help us connect really well with our global customers. So the first thing is to build in some body movement. So when we're on screen, we sometimes forget this, and we end up being very static or still. So do make sure that you build in some movement, even if it's just like shifting your body a little bit, or alternatively, leaning forward sometimes to emphasize your key points. But don't be too close up all the time. You want to kind of stand a little bit further back sometimes, or sit further back. The other thing is to smile. It sounds very, very simple, but a smile instantly changes your mood and it instantly connects with the other people. So that is incredibly important as well. That is part of your body language that helps to engage others in the virtual space. Eye contact. Now, I do get lots of questions about this, and people say to me, oh, do I have to be looking at the camera all the time? Or what do I do with my eyes? I don't really like looking at the camera. So a couple of things to think about. Yes, it's important to be looking at the camera. And I'd say that you want to be doing that pretty much the majority of the time, because remember, that's like looking into the eyes of the other person. But you don't have to be doing that all the time. And in fact, I think it's important to have natural eye movement as well. So that means while you're thinking about a point, you look to the side, or if you need to look at your notes, you look down. But do try and then look up into the camera itself. If you really hate it and you don't like the idea of looking into the camera, my tip there is to try and imagine the person behind it or the people behind it. So try and actually visualize those people, because that helps you remember you're not talking to the camera, you're actually talking to humans. And that's what this is all about, connecting to others. And then a question for you now. Again, you can unmute and let me know what you think about this. Hand gestures, are they good or bad?
Hi, I'm Shilpi. I'm really, really so happy to be here today. I
Oh,
love
good.
communication, and I would say that hand movements or body movements are important, but they should not be used in a way that would distract the listener. So you want to use your hand as if you are in a box. Imagine a box, and your hand should not be further away from your body. So this is the area you can use your hand, not further away. And of course, it's very important because it gives a good orator, it always uses body movements, head movements, hand gestures, eye movements to emphasis. Because when you're explaining things with your hands, the things become more clearer to the listener. And because the space in virtual is so small, I think it is very important to, I wanted to say that before, like when we are placing ourselves, I think it is important that we actually place ourselves in a way that at least our hands are visible when we are talking, our face is visible in a way that when we are making some movements, you know, I was going there and this happened, we can do this. At least this much of distance we need to have from the camera. It gives a good feel to the person you're talking to. It makes them feel that you are able to connect well. And a sign of a good orator is when you're using your hand movements, it gives a feel to yourself as well. You're explaining yourself better. I'm a very expressive person. I'm a kinesthetic person. I'm a dancer, so I use a lot of hands. But yes, you don't want to use your hands too much, because then, you know, the person is looking at your hands and not your words. So that's the balance to maintain, I guess.
That's a great contribution. Thank you so much for that. That's great. I love that. Thank you. And I think you're right. I think there's a balance there to be had. I remember once somebody saying to me, it's about being expressive, but not dramatic. We're not actors, right? We're trying to use this to support our words, support our communication, not lead it. Any other thoughts about hand gestures?
I think like in some cultures, like some of the Southeast Asian cultures, they use very little hand movement. Their hands are quite quiet on the
Yes.
table. So you would not see that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting you raise this because you're absolutely right. Body language is another thing which is culturally driven. For some cultures, it's important actually not to be moving too much, actually to be still and to use more of your words and your tone of voice to communicate what you mean and intend. So the way I like to think about body language is imagine a big volume dial. And you can turn that volume dial up and make it louder, or you can make it softer. And so what I would say to you, again, this is something important in the context of global business, that we can choose how we're doing our body language. And there may be situations where we realize there are cultures where the body language is louder. So we may need to dial it up for ourselves and make sure that we're coming across in a similar level. And there may be cultures where we need to make it softer. We need to dial it down and perhaps not move as much as we're used to. So it is a choice. The only final thought on this, well, actually 2 thoughts I want to leave you with on hand gestures. There was some research done which said that the most popular TED Talks, the speakers in those talks use twice as many hand gestures as the least popular TED Talks. So I thought that was really interesting and said a lot about what in our view is a good speaker and how are they using their hand gestures and body language to support that. The other thing to think about, which I think Shilpi, I think it was who made the first comment, said, which is very important, which is if I'm in a meeting face to face, let's imagine we're in a big room together, then my hand gestures would naturally be, I'm not sure I can really demonstrate this, but I'll try if I stand back a bit. Naturally down here, I don't know if you can really see this, but I'll try. My hands would be further down because I would put my hands by my chest or just below my chest. But in the virtual space, my hands have to be up here, otherwise you don't see them, right? So this is another really interesting point, which I noticed through doing a lot of virtual training and meetings. When we're using hand gestures in the virtual space, the hands have to be raised higher up, and we have to, again, remember the rectangle. So again, we're not being too dramatic and moving the hands outside of the rectangle that we're seen through, but that we're keeping our hands further in. So just two couple of thoughts there, which I think are really helpful to think about this.
Victoria?
Good. Yes. Hello.
Well, you know, one interesting thing is whether it depends on the region of the world that you're born as well, because I use my hands a lot. I was born in New York City. We're influenced by multiple cultures, but I would say certainly Italian infused itself with the level of excitement and expression. So I didn't realize it until someone told me, but I'm so appreciative of what you shared, Chipley, about this box. It's okay to use it, not too much of it, but stay in this space.
Yeah, right. And it's so easy to forget, right? Because we don't see it often ourselves. But it's such a fascinating point. And you'll notice this yourselves now. I hope it doesn't make you too self-conscious in the next few days when you think about it. But yeah, you'll start to build up your own awareness about what your natural level of body language is. And when you start dialing up and when you might choose to dial it down a little bit as well. So these are all kind of the supporting elements, the non-verbal elements, but of course we should also talk about communication itself, the language and words that we use. And I think this is a huge topic as well. I mean, I was thinking about how I was going to condense this into today's event, but I think, you know, what I wanted to bring it to was just that when I think about how we operate in global business, there is clearly this assumption that a lot of business in the world today is done in English. I appreciate there are lots of other languages in the world that business is done in as well. But one of the things that I often say to people who use English is to make sure that actually, on all of us, that we have clear and concise communication. It is so important in global business that we understand each other. And the way for us to do that is to keep it simple. So I often say to people, you know, please be careful of using too many idioms or expressions. Be aware of even though humor in some cultures is a great way to build connection and to make people feel relaxed, humor doesn't work everywhere, and humor doesn't always translate in the same way. So just be really aware of that. So, when it comes to our communication, keep the words simple, make sure your intention and meaning is clear. I'm going to share with you just some very simple questions you can ask yourself, which I use myself, in fact, before any meeting, just to get super clear about what this meeting is about. So the first question is, what is the purpose of this meeting? Sounds like a simple question, but you'd be surprised, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, where you turn up to a meeting and you're thinking, what is this meeting about? Like, what are we here for? What are we doing? So get super clear. What's the objective? What's the purpose of the meeting? Then ask yourself the question, what is your relationship like with the other people? So if this is a customer meeting, do you know them well? Do you know what they like and what they don't like? Or is this a fresh relationship? Is this a brand new meeting, a new relationship where you're going to have to use part of this to kind of find out more about how they are? What's the one thing? This connects to keeping it simple, but just ask yourself this question. If there was one thing they remembered from the meeting, let's say you're meeting your customers, you want them to remember that one thing about your product, your service, or what you're talking to them about, what would it be? If you can start with that in your head before you enter the meeting, that is super helpful, because you have your focus and you can almost open the meeting with that and also close with it, so you know the message has landed. What's their agenda? Now, you may not know this. In some situations, you might not have any view about what their feelings are about your topic, about your product or service. But I think often we can get some feeling. If we've met them before, we might have a feeling about what's their agenda, what's their feeling about this? Is this going to be a difficult conversation, or is this actually relatively going to be an easy sell? And then finally, an easy one to forget when we're in the midst of the meeting, but what's the next step? What's the action that you want? Again, make sure you land this. This is at the end of the meeting. Make sure people are super clear what they need to do next. So that was all I was going to say about that, the clear and concise communication, because I wanted it to be clear and concise. But the point of it, I can share this with people afterwards, but the point of it is that you just ask yourself some simple questions before you get into the meeting to really maximize the opportunity of the interaction. Okay, and then the final part, this is kind of bring us to a close, and then I'll open up for any kind of questions at all or further discussion. The last part of this is, what if it's the opposite way? What if you are not experiencing clear and concise communication, and in fact you're experiencing very vague communication and you're not really sure where you stand? This can be really difficult if you are trying to develop relationships with customers and it's just not quite working and you don't really feel like you know what's going on. I feel it's important to clarify in these situations. You have to understand what's going on. And it's as simple as reflecting and trying to test and probe what's happening. So a number of different ways we can do that. As you can see there, ways that you can clarify meaning, just by using some sort of phrase to just probe, to explore, to check that you've understood correctly what's happening. It's so important. You want to know that you're on the same page as your customer and that you have the same interpretation of what's going on. So as examples, I won't go through all of these, but for example, testing, are you saying their management's reaction to our idea has not been as positive as we hoped? Or does this mean you'd like us to rethink the pricing strategy? And so on. The point of this is that you should never feel like you're in the dark, but we should always kind of use the opportunity with our communication to clarify and know where we're going next. So we're not just sitting there kind of wondering and guessing what our customer needs are. So that brings me to a bit of a close. So before we kind of get a discussion, I just wanted to share with you a couple of things about, like, if today has been interesting in terms of today's talk, just where I would suggest you kind of go next with this. So first of all, I do videos every Wednesday. I call them my Wednesday words, which I share on my YouTube channel. And this is a sign up link to receive the email ping when I go live with that each week. But you can also find me on YouTube at Perfect Cuppa English. Equally, if you've been intrigued by today and actually you feel that for yourself or for your team, you would really benefit from some further depth in this area around communication cultural training, there's a link there to meet me, but clearly just reach out and come talk to me, because I'd love to have a chat with you about how I might be able to support you. And then finally, please follow me on LinkedIn. My surname has a slightly unusual spelling, so that it is there, RENNOLDSON. And I'd love to connect with you. I'm sort of sharing stuff every day of the week, Monday to Friday. And I also love to build conversations with people over in LinkedIn. So I'm going to pause there. Thank you so much for listening and engaging and adding your thoughts. It's really great when we get a bit of kind of conversation going on this topic. So I'm going to pause there and just check and see if there are any sort of further questions or thoughts anybody has at all.
Yes, Victoria, I think some people will appreciate it if you could put a link in the chat box.
Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that. Absolutely. What I'll do is I'll come off. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing now, and then I can do that then. No problems at all. I'll just work on that.
That was super, super. Thank you so much, Victoria.
No problems at all.
Open. Do we have any questions? We have about 15 minutes to end the section. So if you have any specific questions, please let us have them.
My name is Lydia from Ghana. Victoria, that was really, really insightful. I am an etiquette educator. I trained just before the pandemic, and now the world has changed. I do a lot of business etiquette training. I've just kind of started because the space has opened up. So I definitely would link up with you to do some virtual, to add some virtual stuff to the business etiquette training. So this was really good. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Excellent. Oh, fantastic. I'm so pleased to hear that. I'd love to connect with Lydia. That sounds like a really interesting space that you're in. So great.
Yes.
Any other comments?
Okay, let me just make a comment. Sorry, my video is not on, but pardon me. Let me see. Okay.
You are. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Victoria. Thank you. My name is Patricia Kennedy Divine, and I'm calling from the UK. I joined from the UK. I thought it was a brilliant session in terms of really communication and culture. Quite two significant areas, even if you're talking about business or talking about, other forms of interaction and engagement. So I thought this was brilliant, and we look forward to more sessions. I find it very useful, and I apply some of the techniques you've shared, and it's really great. And it's nice to meet all the great people and smilings everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's really great. I'm so pleased. It's so exciting to also have lots of people joining from all over the world today. So it's fantastic to have so many countries represented.
And that's the magic of Global Chamber. So anyone looking to go global, Global Chamber is the right place for you. Feel free to reach out to me after the event and we can discuss your membership. I see our CEO, Doug, is in the house. Your hand is up, please. The floor is yours.
Hi, Ruby. Hi, Victoria. I just had maybe a simple question, maybe not. So the way we learn to do the right thing is usually making bad mistakes over a long period of time, and that seems fairly inefficient. So for young people or old people like me or anybody who may be going to a new country or experiencing something a little bit different, what's your recommendation to not have that cycle of learning by making mistakes? What do we actually do? What do we read books? Do we talk to you? What's the process?
So I think that's a really, really great question. So I think it depends on the level you want to get into. I think as a minimum, I would highly recommend that you reach out through your network. And for example, through Global Chamber, there's going to be somebody out there who can help you. And just kind of find somebody who lives in the country that you want to do business with. Perhaps just ask them some simple questions like, you know, what do I need to be aware of? What's important in terms of, for example, the handshake? You know, that was a great example from Angola. I need, you know, what do I need to know? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? So I would say that's kind of like a minimum level. Clearly there are lots of experts in this field and lots of academic research that you can read books on. But of course, you know, for cultural training, which is what I do in my space, communication cultural training, I think that is so important because it's not just about self-awareness and an awareness of what's going on in the dynamic with the other country or countries that you're working with. It's also thinking about, okay, so how do I translate this into some strategies that are going to work, and how am I going to create an action plan that's going to work to help bridge any kind of potential cultural differences. So I think that's, you know, if somebody is, you know, just wanting to kind of get some information, that can be done fairly easily. But obviously cultural training gives you that edge in terms of, particularly if it's a big opportunity or it's about several opportunities in one place, and you really need to deep dive into what's going on in that. I hope that answers your question, Doug.
I think it does. Maybe a related question would be, what is it that you do? You know, how do you help individuals or companies be more successful? Do you do like a consulting practice, or is it mainly through your speaking? How does that work?
That's a really great question. So the way that I work with individuals in programs, if there's a particular individual that needs to develop this area, but I also work with teams. So I help teams in half-day, one-day workshops in terms of cultural training and communication training to help them think about how they're going to get the insight, the action planning ready so they can be more successful in their business operations.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you for being part of the global tribe. And I think those of us that are interested in international business, we're more sensitive to listening and to certainly occasionally making mistakes, but hopefully making fewer mistakes. Those that are not going to be very good with global business tend to be, one of the reasons is that they're kind of oblivious and not really sensitive to the environment, right? And maybe not very good listeners. So we know bad examples, lots of bad examples, but what we want to do is get better and better. And so we really appreciate what you bring to the table and other resources. I know Doug Hartley, the other Doug in the room, does the same kind of work for Asia specifically. There are many books available. The book for me that changed my life was Riding the Waves of Culture by Fons Trompenaars, when I started to realize that there were fundamental differences between people, like you pointed out. It really makes a big difference in how you approach that. One of the things that many of us were raised with is treat others like you want to be treated, right? The golden rule, very biblical. And that's not always a good idea in many things. And so thank you for your leadership and all the knowledge that you have here.
No problems. Well, I mean, the other book, I mean, I highly recommend, which I really, you know, for me, I think is a very clear explanation of cultural dynamics and cultural intelligence, is Erin Hunter, The Culture Map, if anybody has come across that. And she has a very sort of simple and clear approach, which I think, and tells the stories of how to do this well in a very kind of compelling and engaging way. So again, that's a great introduction if anybody wants to take this further. And the last thing to say is that mistakes happen. I think the main thing is that we learn from those mistakes. And clearly, if we do sort of make a mistake, we kind of acknowledge it, we apologize, we realize we've done it, but then we take it forward and learn from it. So that is the main thing. You know, we don't need to be perfect. That is important as well. We sometimes need to bring ourselves and realize that we need to adapt, but mistakes may happen.
It's hard to imagine that you ever made a mistake in your career.
Oh, I've done plenty. Don't you worry.
Right, thank you all. I think we have a last hand up. Derek, are you there?
I'm here. Do I still have time? If there isn't, it's okay. I can go really quickly.
Do a quick one, and then we end it with you.
Okay. Well, Victoria, was awesome. Thank you so much. And one of the things I wanted to point out was how you engaged us as the audience. And I think regardless of culture, every 5 or 6 minutes, engage the audience in questions. It can be a poll, it can be a breakout session, whatever works for the occasion. And it was brilliant the way you did that. I mean, we've been sitting in Zoom meetings for 2 years, and we still have meetings and sessions where somebody just drones on for hours and hours on end. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. That's great to have that feedback. It means a lot to me. And to be honest with you, I get bored with my own voice. So that's why I need to engage everybody here to get involved in the conversation. Otherwise, I just get bored. But no, thank you. I mean, it means a lot to me. And it's something that I really pay attention to as well, to get the energy up and people part of the conversation. So thank you.
Okay, anyone want to say quick hello or introduce themselves? We have few minutes left.
Ruby, I would be remiss if I did not communicate to this incredible team, and a great job, Victoria. I always get benefit from your presentations, your Globinar. It's just always an added value. But I would be remiss if I didn't extend an invitation from Global Chamber Atlanta to all of you in attendance for our Global Chamber Tea Party. It's at 3 p.m. Eastern time this coming Sunday, the first Globinar of the month of May. You're inviting. We're going to be networking, and certainly we always talk about culture as relates to tea. And I'm trying to keep my hands right here. So the link is actually in the chat. Go ahead and sign up, join us. And just a little shout out, if you haven't and you've been on the fence about joining Global Chamber, let me just tell you that it's not only changed my life, my business, but it changes the life of those that I'm in contact with. So come on, join the team, join the tribe.
Thank you, Dana. That was great. I certainly will be joining on Sunday. And I will be coming along with tea masala from Kenya. So Derek, take note of that.
Awesome, awesome.
Hi, Dana, I've signed up too, but that's going to be 12:30 in the morning. So I don't know.
Listen, I won't call on you, Mona, but I'm so glad you've got to at least talk about tea. I mean, you're in the region. Yeah. You're in the region.
Probably I'll have my masala tea at 12:30 in the morning.
Yes.
And stay up all night.
We're gonna have some special treats for those who are coming on, and it's 1 in the morning. Don't you worry.
Okay. On that
Thank you, Ruby, for a wonderful session. Thank you.
Yes, I thank you all for joining us. We meet every last Tuesday of the month. So the next section will be 31st of May. So watch out for the next topic. Thank you all for your time. And thank you, Victoria, for your time as well. You are amazing, always amazing. Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you.
Victoria, if you want to say your last words, please.
No, just thank you. Thank you so much, Ruby. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody for joining. I really enjoyed today's conversation. I thought it was great. I love the contributions from everybody. So really great to see everyone, and love being part of the Global Chamber community as well. So thank you. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Cesar, and everybody else.
Thank you all. And
thank you. Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you, Victoria. That was really, really insightful.
Thank you, Victoria.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Very much.